Montgomery County Board of Education work session Tuesday, September 11, 2018, now called to order. Central Office, 307 South Decatur Street. We do have a quorum with all members present. We need a motion this time to approve the revised agenda.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt the revised agenda as printed.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second that we adopt the revised agenda as printed. Is there any discussion? Those who are in favor, let's see by show of hands. It is unanimous. First item on our agenda is to receive as information a $2,500 gift card donation by Office Depot.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for having us out here this afternoon, having this opportunity. Office Depot has been a proud partner with Montgomery Public Schools for over 10 years, both our retail stores and our business division as well. And when we think about what happened at Booker T. Washington, we were moved back and make sure that we were able to support our local community and give back. So this is a small way of our ability to show our appreciation and our support, and we look forward to hopefully being able to find many ways to continue those efforts in the weeks, months, years ahead. But we want to thank Montgomery Public Schools and Booker T. Washington for your partnership, and we hope to be a big part in their endeavors as we move onward and upward.
We have the BTW faculty, if you're here, to stand also, please. Are you here? Okay, good.
Thank you.
And again, we'd like to thank Office Depot for your generous donation. Certainly be used wisely. The next item on our agenda will be the $1,500 donation by
Chairman,
Furniture.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, can we do a photo op with that? Do you mind if we do a photo op with the chair, vice chair,
I think it would be a
super?
great thing.
I
Okay.
think the whole board
Okay.
should stand
Okay.
behind it. Sorry, I'm like,
No,
all
that's fine.
Why don't we do that?
right, let's do it.
Let's go.
Come on, Larry. Mr. Roller, let's go.
No. And accept, you gotta come back and present, okay?
Oh,
Get out, get out.
We also have Cox Furniture, who's making donations to us. We certainly appreciate all the donations we can get. And, okay, well, let's stay with them, and you come right back up. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Hold it. So they were standing in front of me. You guys hold it. They were standing in front of me. Hold it. Great, thank you. All right, perfect.
Now we can have Cox come up and, you make your presentation, and we appreciate your all. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, good evening. Is it on? Okay. I am Ophelia Cox with Cox Commercial Interiors. We are a commercial contract furniture and interior design dealership out of Birmingham. We've also been a partner of MPS for the past 10 years. We have been fortunate to work with Mr. Rudolph on several successful projects, namely Park Crossing, Carver, McIntyre, M-Tech, and Lamb. Yes. Yes, and Impact, and Lamb. Yes, and Bellingraph. Wonderful. And with those projects, we were able to provide furniture and consultation with furniture layout, the different finishes, and we treated each individual schools. We met each individual school needs. So we wanted to, after we heard about the devastation caused by the fire at BTW. We wanted to help. And we wanted to, so that's why we're here tonight, is to make a donation of $1,500. Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, we consider you guys a very valuable partner. Yes, yes. And not only that, we've also reached out to one of our manufacturers partners, KI, and they have agreed to deliver a few furniture pieces. So these are innovative pieces that I'm thinking perhaps can go all in one space, and you can have a creative, learning, collaborative space that's different for the kids. Yes, so. And who do I give a real check to?
Oh, what did you say? I guess you.
Thank you.
Larry's gonna hold my chair,
I am.
so I'm gonna go sliding out that door.
I'm gonna spin it around.
That's fine. I wouldn't mind.
Okay, the next item on our agenda, 4C, Montgomery County Board of Education Policy Manual, Ms. Kim Pitts, Section 1, Governing Principles, and Section 2, School Board Operations.
Thank you, President, and to our board members and our superintendent. You should have at your desk a copy of the draft that looks like this. This is gonna be the easy part. And I say this is the easy part because the other sections are very detailed. This section is just about what you do and the governing principles. Included in that is we've updated, of course, our mission and our vision statement and our core values. Hopefully you've had a chance to peruse that. We won't go over this in depth, but I do want to point out some things to you. Because this is tonight for you just to look at it. Hopefully you looked at it over the weekend. But for you to look at it and think about some things, this is not final. Remember, it is not final until you say so. So you do have input, anything that you see that you don't like. I can always take that back to our attorney. She's not our board attorney, but she's the one who helped with that. Her name is Melissa McKee, and I think I've told you all that before. But let's just walk through just a few pieces real quickly. If you look at the table of contents, which is the very first page, you'll notice that there are no more letters. Normally it's A, B, C, and then the letters go A, B, C, D, or it'll say A, G, L, F. Notice that now that it's just numbers, which I think is gonna be a lot easier. So anything that has a 1 next to it will deal with governing principles. So there are 3 items under governing principles: our purpose and our direction, our vision, and our core values. And those have been updated to reflect what we do now. When you look back in your old policy manual, you'll see that the one that we have in there are several vision and mission statements from the past. So this will be the updated one. In governing principles, those are the only things that are included. Questions about those 3 little pieces? All right, the second part is school board operations. In school board operations, those are the things that you're responsible for. The composition, how the board is made up, how many members, our officers, if you want to have a committee, how that's done. Then it talks about the duties and the authority of board members, how you're compensated, and board member training.
I'm so sorry, but I see somewhere on the 2.12, the officers, that needs to be held every 2 years because president and vice president it's a 2-year term.
Okay, I'm making that correction now. Anything else from that section? Yes, sir?
In 2.2, shouldn't that say within Montgomery County?
Look at it.
Well, but you know what, Larry, now that we have Pike Road, that's gonna be different.
It is.
you know, so it
Right.
can't be the county.
It's still in the county.
But it's not the whole county,
Right.
you know, we're gonna have, it's
And
district, my district's getting ready to
And
be
you're
cut.
absolutely right. That's one thing that our attorney pointed out with that, and I'm looking at my notes as well. If that's something you want to change, she could might reword it in some way, but that was the purpose behind it, so you're absolutely right. Look at 2.3. Do you see anything that you'd like to add or subtract from board member compensation? And if you notice, there's a reference for everything here that is embedded with the law. If it's law, we cited that just so you can know where you can find the full law, so you can read it in its entirety if you'd like to do that. 2.4, which deals with board member training. And notice too that there's a board self-evaluation in there. And I think we've talked about that earlier this year and how that'll be done. And you know, Dr. Nettles usually leads you all through those things. Then 2.5 are actual board meetings, the general provisions, time and place, special call board meetings, and rules of order. Give me just a minute to look to see if you have questions. Okay. 2.6 is the superintendent's responsibilities, qualifications, and appointment. Then it tells her role, her responsibilities, qualifications, and the term, and then the scope of executive and administrative authority. And once again, when the law is embedded, it's cited so that you can see the full portion of the law.
Why do we have to have 2.8?
The attorney just said that she recommends that you put that there. If that's something you don't want, it's something we can take it out. Most of the boards do maintain a membership. And she's looking at, remember, she's done 42 of these across the state of Alabama. That was her recommendation.
What do y'all think, board members?
I think it has value.
It looks, this makes it look like we've got to be a member of AASB, and
So would you like for it to say something that gives you a little flexibility if you don't want to be a member?
And let me just remind you, Mr. Chairman, that the board has to do certification hours, or they have to do their professional development hours, and oftentimes your membership grants you additional services that go along with that professional development and continuing ed that is the requirement by law for boards. So
I agree.
if you say may or shall, I understand, but remember those professional ed and continuing ed courses are a requirement, Mr. Chairman.
But we could also, we don't have to, the law says, I mean, I'm not arguing with you, and I agree that is the very convenient way to meet the law, but the law doesn't say it has to be AASB, and I just don't think that we should just limit ourselves to that. I mean, you know, you've got the National School Board Association, you've got CUBE. There are a lot of different organizations that we've been members of in the past as a board. Ms. Byers, you're, besides you, me, and Ms. Dawkins, we're the oldest board members here. And what are your thoughts? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot right now.
I think it's important that we belong to an association, because you do get,
Sure.
hours from that, but.
I like May.
Maintain membership in a school board association and not spell out Alabama, because we can get continuing ed from, Troy, from Alabama State. It doesn't always have to come from
Right.
Alabama Association of School Boards. We've just always done that, but I mean, to just single them out, because we could have membership in another association, but I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
it's very important that we belong to an association, but I see what you're saying, it looks like whoever did this, that we have to maintain our membership in Alabama, is holding us to that.
I just, since it's policy, I think it needs to be a little bit more open, like, we need to be, like, I agree, but I don't think we need to just lock it into that organization.
Well,
Let's
may
try
I,
this.
may I,
Let's try this.
may I say something also? So, I think two things to consider, to do the research on this, now that you brought it up. This does not say that you can't be a member of anything else.
Sure.
But also, if I'm remembering correctly, there are certain kinds of training that only AASB can approve. And if they don't approve it, they have to approve the person or the group that you use in some cases before you can use another outside group for certain kinds of training. So I think we need to maybe do a little bit more research on what that legal piece might be, and then come up with the best way to say this statement. But we'll note that you have some questions about this particular one. Then when we bring it back, we can address it a little bit more in detail.
Okay.
That work? Would that work?
Yes, ma'am. I
Okay.
just want to make sure that we have, for the future board, some flexibility and we're not stuck because we don't know. I mean, what if at some point we get to where we don't want to be aligned with them?
Right, I mean, it's same as what we were going through at one time with the National
Right.
Association of School Boards, so certainly it should be something to give you leeway.
Sure.
It's a may rather than shall, will. Yeah.
Mr. President, I have one question, in regards to the association membership. Do we know of any other school districts in the state that are using some of the other ones that you named? I'm just not familiar with them, that's why I'm asking.
Well, first of all, I think most of them are, if not all, are members of AASB. We have been members of other ones as well. We pared down to save money. So I think that we should, if we could look at wording it to where we, our board has flexibility.
Okay,
This is what I have.
Go
I
ahead.
have, the board will maintain, because you will need to maintain a membership in a school board association of your choice. And then we'll let the attorney look at that, and she'll see if there's any kind of ramifications either way. And I can let you know that at the next presentation, please.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
sounds good.
Could I ask how much our membership dues are?
That's a good question.
I said it would curl your hair.
Not sure, I might find that out.
I think it's, well, I'm not
Well,
gonna say.
On that topic, I'd love to see us look at all the dues that we pay to class, to SSA, and just, when I'm giving money to a teacher at Jeff Davis so she can buy cleaning supplies for her room, then I start to question a whole lot of things.
Any other questions from sections 1 and 2? So this is easy. The rest of them may not be this easy.
You following the law on this.
Yeah, this is just strictly the law. The rest of them, you'll have more flexibility. And each time a group comes up to present, whether it's me or the other committee members, please give them your true input, because this is our time to get it right. And we're paying for this right now. Everything that we're doing right now is paid for, so give them your true input. And remember, don't lock yourself in. What we try to do is go through each one of them to make sure we're not locking ourselves in. The more you lock yourself in, the more litigious it usually becomes. The other thing you need to really consider, when we write and we make policy, that if you forget one little step, because you put in all those extra steps, if we don't follow those steps, we're held responsible for those steps. So I like the fact that you're looking at this closely, so thank you so much for your time. If there are no more questions, any more? Thank you much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Ms. Pitts. The next item on our agenda is certificate of affirmation. Board member Larry Lee. Would come up.
Okay, so, Mr. Lee, we are required to have you sign this affirmation.
Yes, ma'am.
And so what I'd like for you to do is, because it has I in it, If you don't mind, would you read it? Because you're the one that's going to sign it.
Yeah. Read it aloud.
Yeah,
Yes. So everybody will know what you're signing.
yeah.
As slow as I talk, we may be here a while.
Try to speed it up there, Larry, please.
As required by the School Board Governance Improvement Act of 2012, I do hereby affirm all of the following principles of educational governance. Number one, that each decision, action, and vote I take or make as a member of the school board shall be based solely on the needs and interests of students or the system. Two, that I will take or make no decision, action, or vote to serve or promote my personal, political, or pecuniary interest. Three, that each decision, action, and vote I take or make shall be based on the educational interest of the school system as a whole. Four, that I will consider the views of all members of the board and the superintendent before making a decision or taking an action on any measure or proposal before the board. Five, that except to the extent otherwise provided by law, I shall take formal action only upon the written recommendation of and in consultation with the superintendent, and that I may not individually or jointly attempt to direct or corrupt the operations of the school system in a manner inconsistent with the discharge of the statutory functions and responsibilities of the superintendent. Six, that I shall actively promote public support for the school system and a sound statewide system of public education, and shall endorse ideas, initiatives, and programs that are designed to improve the quality of public education for all students. Seven, that I shall attend scheduled meetings and actively participate in school system functions, activities, and training programs that promote quality boardmanship unless good cause is shown. So help me God.
Well, yes. Affirm this lady. You can press to sign that.
Thank you, and at
Yes,
some
sign.
point, Mr. Lee, if you'll sign that and give it to me before you leave,
All righty.
I would deeply appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will have a special call board meeting immediately following. And at this time, this meeting is adjourned. Good afternoon again. Our special call board meeting is now called to order. We do have a quorum with all members in attendance. Need a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we approve the agenda as printed. Is there any discussion? Those who are in favor, let's see by a show of hands. Again, it's unanimous. At this time, item four, receive this information, discussion of the FY 2019 budget hearing. Mr. Arthur Watts.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Members of the board, Dr. Moore. We also would like to thank you for coming out and joining in with us in our first budget hearing. As most of you all know, the law requires that we present 2 budget hearings for the public. Now, these hearings are for the benefit of the public, so we do encourage public input. In fact, if you all have one of those budget books, the very last page of that budget book should have what is called a suggestion form. And that form provides you an opportunity to make any comments. If you have any questions that you'd like us to entertain, then certainly feel free to give us that back after this hearing. Also, after the hearing, we'll open the floor up for board member questions. And after board members ask their question, we entertain those questions, then we'll open the floor up for the public. So we do want your input. Again, as I stated, the law requires that we present 2 budget hearings. And as you see, today is the very first budget hearing, which is September 11th. We propose to have the next budget hearing on September 13th at the same time, 5 o'clock p.m. And as I look across, I see my wife here and my two sisters here for moral support, so I really appreciate you guys coming. And y'all stick around now, make me feel more support.
You don't need all that. You won't need all that.
Our budget process is both interactive and inclusive. What we try to do, we try to talk to as many people as we possibly could. We want to talk to principals. Ms. Pitt has already met with every principal in the district to gather information from those principals about their needs for the fiscal year 2019. We also talk to the various department heads. We want to see what the department heads' priorities are and what their needs are in putting together our budget. We don't want, because I'm an accountant, to sit back and I say, well, let's determine that this department needs X number of dollars. This department, well, they know what their needs are a lot better than I do. So we want that type of input and that type of inclusiveness in putting together our budget. Usually our budget process usually starts around January or February. And so next year, for 2020, that budget process will start much, much earlier. And that'll give us an opportunity to talk even more with the various department heads, community members, and others. Again, this is required to hold 2 public hearings. Board members and employees routinely make suggestions about the budget. So we'll certainly entertain any comments that board members have. And of course, the law requires that board members approve the budget by September 15th. I think September 15th this year is on a Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. So the state has extended that to that Monday for us to have the budget in and have the budget approved. Now, while we do encourage public input from the public, there are also some things that we have to keep in mind as a district. For example, budget constraints. As we know, even in our household budget, you can't spend what you don't have. And ladies and gentlemen, we have some challenges. We really have some challenges. And we're going to be asking the public, along with the board and other entities, to support us in these challenges. Also, there are laws and guidelines that are set forth by the Alabama State Department of Education. And so we have to be within those boundaries of law, or boundaries of policies and procedures that's set forth by the Alabama State Department of Education. Also, we have the Alabama State Legislature that writes laws and writes acts regarding education. So of course, we have to work within those parameters as well. Of course, the U.S. Department of Education. We do receive federal dollars, over $40-some million in federal dollars. Therefore, in order to continue to receive those funds, we have to also operate within the laws set forth by the federal government. And of course, there are other organizations such as Advanced Ed. And of course, we know that we want to also ensure that we are within those parameters as well. Now, there are some funds that we receive from the state that requires us to what is called locally fund match. For example, we will receive about $150 million from the state. And state funding, called the State Foundation Program, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But in order for us to receive that $150 million from the state is saying, okay, we'll provide this $150 million to you, but also understand that education is also a product of local government. Therefore, in order to receive this $150 million, Montgomery County, we want you to put up about $24 million. Now, we don't have to send this money to the state, but we do have to allocate this money in the foundation program to assist in paying for salaries and benefits of our employees. So in order to get that $150 million from the state, we will have to put up over $24 million of our own monies, own district-wide funds, in order to participate in the state's foundation program. We'll also receive about $8 or $9 million from the state from what is called state capital purchase funds. Well, there's a match requirement in that too, in which we'll have to put up over $2 million to participate in that particular funding source. School districts operate on basically 5 financial funds. First, there is the general fund. And the general fund accounts for basically the general operations of a school district. That would consist of mainly your state funds, your local funds, local appropriations, mainly property taxes. Of course, then you have the special revenue fund. Special revenue fund would be mainly our federal dollars. That's what special revenue funds are. They're mainly our federal allocations that we receive. And of course, as we see, it says federal programs and funds designated for a specific purpose. Therefore, we can't just expend these funds like we can expend general fund dollars. They are just so very, very stringent lines as to how we spend special revenue funds. For example, let's say that we got $7 or $8 million in special ed funds. Well, those dollars have to be spent principally and only for our special needs students. If we got received whatever amount of money for career tech, those dollars have to be expended strictly for career tech, for our career tech students. So there are strings tied to those special revenue funds, child nutrition funds, strictly for the feeding of our students. Then, of course, we have the capital projects fund, which says acquisition of construction and major capital expenditures. These are mainly expenditures related to capital outlay, the building and renovations of schools and other buildings within the school district. The debt service fund is for the payment of long-term debt. And of course, we do have some long-term debt that we are addressing at this time. The fiduciary fund is what is called non-public local school activity money. Our school pretty much, any one of our local schools, unless it's used a high school, for example, have two major funds. Those funds are divided into what is called public funds and non-public funds. Now, the public funds would be funds such as admissions of a basketball game. Those funds are derived for the whole school on behalf of athletics. But those funds could be used for the whole school, not just athletics, but they can be transferred and used for the entire school if we chose to do that. Now, usually, most schools are not going to choose to do that. And so they usually have those funds. They usually make decisions related to those particular funds. Concession, when they sell concessions, those concession funds would be termed public funds. But now you also got non-public funds. Non-public funds would be more like a club fund. For example, you may have a science club, where those money is strictly for the science department or for those science students. Or you may have the FFA club, and so those funds are strictly for the FFA students. So that would be considered fiduciary funds. We're proposing a budget of almost $288 million for fiscal year 2019. And there we see a breakdown of those particular funds. We see that our general fund, about $222 million. Again, general fund are mainly for the general operations of the school district. It will consist of both our state funds and our local funds. State foundation program funds, property taxes, sales taxes are mainly our general fund dollars. Special revenue fund, specific type funds, and they are mainly derived from the federal government. The Title I, Title II, child nutrition, all of those will be termed special revenue funds. Debt service fund, again, to pay for long-term debt. We are paying principal and interest at this time on some long-term debt. Capital projects fund, about $9 million. And again, those dollars are to address our capital needs, the renovation and building of schools. Then the fiduciary expendable trust fund, non-public local school funds. Again, we're proposing a budget for fiscal year 2019 of about $288 million. Let's talk about the general fund first, where we stated about $222 million. Again, we see that figure, $222 million there. And so we want to look at the breakdown of the general fund. And we see we're projecting to receive about $164 million of that $221 million from the state of Alabama. Now, we've already talked about the state's foundation program, which we're proposing to receive about $150 million. But there are also other state funds that we project to receive dollars. At-risk funds is one of them. Pre-K funds, state pre-K funds is another source of fund. At-risk pre-K, there's some other funds called O&M funds, which also assist in career tech. So they're there, and I'll give you a breakdown, a little bit of breakdown of those funds in just a second, of that $164 million. Well, in our general fund, we also get a little bit of federal dollars in our general fund. These are mainly ROTC dollars. Of course, the federal government do provide it was not quite a half of the salaries, the money for salaries and benefits for our ROTC staff, but they do contribute about 40–45% towards the cost of ROTC staff. So we're looking at about $298,000 there. Local funds, about $54.7 million. Again, those local dollars would be property taxes and mainly property taxes and sales taxes. Other revenue and fund sources about $2.9 million. That would be, most of those dollars are derived what is called indirect cost. Indirect cost. Indirect cost is a small administrative fee that our general fund assessed to our federal funds in order to run those programs. Child nutrition is one program that we assess that administrative fee. Title I and Title II or federal funds that we administer that small administrative fee to oversee those particular programs. Let's look at a pie chart of our total funds. And we see in that pie chart that the grand majority of our funds are indeed derived from the state of Alabama. We see local funds at almost 25%. Mr. President, I'm about to say something that I think it needs to be said. This says to me that we're too dependent on state funds, on state revenues. I don't think we're receiving enough local funds to truly support education.
Well, we've been saying that for a long time, Mr. Watts.
Okay. Well, I think this pie chart states that as well. And of course, what I'll do, I'll get some comparative data from some other places or other school districts that have some of the similar demographics as Montgomery County. And we'll look at some of those fund sources. I think a pretty good amount, in my opinion, it's about 35 to 40% of local revenues. I think it's a good amount to support education. And I'll get that comparative data for you, Mr. President, so that you all can see that.
Thank you very much.
And the reason I'm saying this, and I know it can be a very controversial statement to make, but when the state have a hiccup in its funding, and we do not have, and we're so dependent on state funds, when the state have a hiccup in its funding, such as that bad word that we call proration, then it puts so much pressure on a local district to make drastic cuts. Because you're not able then to pick up those costs for that short period until the state rebound. Now, we do know now that the state have a proration prevention account. We know about that now. But again, I think it is important that any district be self-supported as much as possible.
Mr. Watts?
Yes, sir.
As long as the county remains at the minimum that's required by the state of that 10 mil, we'll continually have financial problems. We all understand that Montgomery County is the least amount of money, the minimum amount. Matter of fact, if we didn't have the 10 mil match, we couldn't participate in the foundation program.
Right.
But we receive the minimum relative to what we call ad valorem taxes or property taxes. So certainly at some point in time, if this system is to sustain itself, there's going to be a need to increase ad valorem taxes.
Yes, sir. And I'll point some things out on that a little bit later. The state funds all school districts primarily, based on student enrollment. Now I'd like everybody to read that, to look at that statement. Each district receives a proportional share of state funding based on its enrollment. And we're talking primarily about the foundation program, but I'll let you all read that. So based on our enrollment, makes up about 4% of the total student population in the state of Alabama. So we'll receive approximately 4% of the total state funding. But I want to point out also that that very next bullet, the difference in the quality of education in terms of funding is being a product of local support. Read that again. The district and the quality of education in terms of funding is being a product of local support. Of course, districts that provide more local support per pupil have several advantages. They have an opportunity for a lower student-teacher ratio.
Arthur,
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
doesn't this number run a year behind?
It does. It's a year in arrears, yes. Yes, sir. And of course, districts that provide more local support have enhanced student opportunities. Here we see, and I should have, on this particular slide, instead of saying student enrollment, and I'll make this correction, I should have said student ADM. That's exactly what those numbers represent. That is the student's ADM, average daily membership. And I'll explain what average daily membership is in just a second. But we do see what our average daily membership has been over the last several years. And we see that based on our student population, well, let me just say this first. Our ADM is derived from our student population. And so, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So based on our ADM, we see that we've had a drop in students over the last several years. So that is an area that we really want to try to stop the bleeding in as soon as possible. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Watson, you and I have talked about this.
Yes.
And, you know, I tried all, before you got here, with Mr. Taylor, to give me a figure that we could really put our teeth in, and we kept getting different numbers.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm looking at and I have my report from Jason. And I'm looking at your totals here, and his totals as far back as 2017.
Yes, ma'am.
So how are we going to make up for this with what he has and what you have as far as our budget for 2019?
Okay. I want to get an opportunity to look at his numbers first, Ms. Brower, and then I'll get back with you and after I have an opportunity to compare the numbers that he has comparable to the ones that I have.
Okay.
And then I'll let you know.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, foundation program units. Districts earn what is called teacher units and teacher support units based on its ADM, which is derived from student enrollment. Again, districts earn what is called teacher units and teacher support units based on ADM, which is derived from student enrollment. Now, why is units important, or teacher units or teacher support units important? Because that's where the funding comes from. Based on the number of teacher units we earn, or the number of teacher support units we earn, we obtain dollars based on that. And what the state does is, it looks at the various grade levels at a school. And based on the number of students in those grade levels, we will earn what is called a teacher unit. And then the state will take that teacher unit, and there's a state salary matrix. They'll apply that unit to the state salary matrix and add the benefits to it, look at the teacher's degree and years of experience, and that will determine how much money we'll get. For example, let's say that in all of our elementary schools and grades K through 3, just grades K through 3, not K through 6, just grades K through 3. Let's say district-wide, we have 50,000 students. Well, let's not say 50,000 students, let's say 5,000 students. 5,000 K through 3 students. The state would take those 5,000 K through 3 students, and they may say, well, based on the number of K through 3 students you have, for every 14 of those students, you will earn 1 teacher unit. So we'll take that 5,000 students, divided by 14, that would be the number of teacher units we earn. And so based on that number of teacher units we earn, based on the state's salary matrix, they'll plot that amount of money for the district based on those number of teacher units. And they also look at, again, the teachers' years of experience and their degrees earned. So, in the state foundation program, we see that our ADM for 2019 is 29,476 students. I'll just say students, although we know this is ADM. 2018 was 30,275. That's almost an 800 student change, negatively. Now, we know that.
Arthur.
Yes, sir.
A question. We get beat up on the student decline in enrollment,
Yes, sir.
but we're just going along with the pack because there's 137 school systems in the state, and in between the year before last and last year, 87 of them lost students.
Right.
So over half the systems in the state, what's happening in Montgomery is what's happening all across the state. Mountain Brook lost students.
Right.
And I never heard the interim superintendent jump up and down and say, oh, we gotta wring our hands about Mountain Brook.
Right. I think that is very, very fair. In fact, the state of Alabama lost students. I think the state had, about 734,000 students. Whereas ADM was based on 734,000 students in 2018. This year, I think it's based on, on that, didn't it say 730,000 students? 730,000 students. So we know the state of Alabama lost students this year. So I think it's great to point that out.
Where are they going? Do we know?
That's something we
Well, many of ours went to Pike
Change in
Road.
population.
Yeah,
Many of ours
Nature.
went to Pike Road. If you look at our decline in enrollment, you'll see that our enrollment started with the inception of Pike Road. Many of our students that were in Montgomery County now participate in Pike Road education. Now, that's maybe it's not the whole total amount, but a large number there, and we lost those students.
Right. And of course, I assume that we can do a study based on the population decline, and again, I think it's also important to find out why are we losing families and losing people in the state of Alabama? Because as I stated, there were 734,000 students that the state of Alabama was funded on in 2018, 2019, it's about 730,000. So there's a 4,000 student drop there as well, so. Okay, so we're losing about 800 students for fiscal year 2019. We know that because we are funded based on that student population, that when we lose students, then we know that our funding decreases. We know that. Same thing when you gain students. The funding increases based on those number of units that you earn in those various grade divisors. We see that for fiscal year 2019, we will be funded based on 1,709 teacher units, comparable to 2018, 1,758 teacher units. Principals, will be funded for 52 principals, as we were last year. We see the amount for assistant principals along with the other categories. But we see that total units will be funded based on 1,913 units, comparable to 1,961 units the prior year, which is almost a 50 unit drop in fiscal year 2019. Now let's look at exactly what the state does and what it would do for us for 2019. We see that the state is saying, okay, with certain funds that we provide you out of the state's foundation program, those funds must be spent towards salaries and benefits. You have to meet that level of expenditures in the area of salaries and benefits. And we see for 2019 that we must expend $96.9 million for salaries and benefits, comparable to 2018 of $9.3 million. So that's a $558,000 increase. And we'll get to that in just a second. Fringe benefits, $38.8 million, comparable to $38.9 million in 2018. Other current expenses, that's called OCE, is mainly how it's referred to. These are dollars that we generate from the state, and it's kind of interesting. These are dollars that are used to pay for basically classified support employees, whether it's custodians, accountants, bookkeepers, secretaries, and so forth. Those monies help support us in those areas. It's also used, though, to help pay for utility bills. So all of our utilities, all those utility bills come out of OCE. It's not enough, and I need to compare to what we got in 2000, and what year was that proration hit?
2008.
To see where we was as it relates to OCE in 2008. Because if I recall correctly, I still don't think we have reached the amount per unit that we received in 2008.
I know we had. As a matter of fact, if you notice, stayed in proration not only in 2008, but 3 years in a row. 2008, 9, as well as 10.
Right.
And right now, we have not reached that level of funding that we had back in 2008.
Right, and so that's something that I hope that the state will continue to do in supporting education.
Mr. Watt, on the OCE expenses, at one time, High Hopes was a part of OCE. We haven't had that in a couple of years, and I noticed looking at some of the things in here, and you probably will get to that, it's not on here again for this year.
Right.
But that was a very good program for our students who were like not on grade level and all of that. So it always came out of OCE expenses
Yes,
to
ma'am.
pay for those. So I hope that some kind of way we can manipulate that back in.
Yes, ma'am. What the state has done, right now, they pretty much folded all of that into one fund, so it's called at-risk, is what basically what it's done.
Yeah.
And so at-risk could be used for some of those same type of expenditures. I ain't not necessarily saying the funding have increased, but it is saying that at-risk dollars could be used for some of those same type of expenditures. But I do see what you're saying.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll just keep having high hopes.
Right. Yeah, I hope so.
We do see where the state legislature did allocate a little bit more money for teachers to purchase student material and supplies. They are appropriating $536.07 per teacher unit comparable to last year, $421.51 per teacher unit. So we're just glad to see that. We hear so often that teachers are taking monies out of their pocket to help, support their classroom. So anytime we see a little increase in that, then we're very happy about that. There also was a little bit of increase in technology per unit, from $211 to $300 per unit. Library enhancement did increase from $30.43 per unit to $96.13 per unit. Professional development from $77.55 per unit to $90 per unit. And of course, we see textbooks from $54 to $70 per student. That's based on the number of ADM that the textbooks are. But again, as many of you know, and I stated this once before, that we all know that a textbook itself sometimes can cost over $70. So I would like to see that particular category increase as well.
I was gonna ask that, each student gets $70 to spend on all their textbooks.
Yes, ma'am. The other district is allocated $70 per ADM, per earned ADM to spend on textbooks. I think our earned ADM was 100 and, how many, what was ADM? 36, no, it was 30, so 29,000 something.
Yeah.
Yes.
For this year, yeah.
Okay, who sets that? I mean, cause that's really
State
kinda,
legislature, state legislature.
Okay. And so, may I add something right here, Mr. Watts?
Yes, ma'am.
Over here. About textbooks. So remember, we're on a cycle, we don't adopt everything every year. So we purchase, so we kind of accumulate the money into a lump sum to replace or buy new books. But it still is the value of $70 per student. And typically, as I recall, you have to buy books as far as that money goes, from the youngest to as far as it'll go. And so normally around second, third grade, that money runs out. And so the rest of it is local money. You have to pitch in and get the rest of your books as needed.
Right, so therefore, there's still that need for local support because we have to pitch in locally to pick up the shortfall in those textbooks.
And that-
We'll just make it-
And that takes away from our general fund.
It does, yes, ma'am.
May I ask a specific question?
Yes, sir.
I keep hearing from lots of people about our science textbook situation, particularly as it applies to elementary schools, and that we don't have what we need this year. Can somebody give me an answer about what our situation is with science textbooks?
I can give you what I've learned. So basically, we, throughout, all the way up through high school, adopted, for whatever reason, consumable books. Which means, that's unusual, because that means now we have to replace a consumable book every year in science. And we may be adopting a different book, but that consumable science takes money repetitiously every year. So that causes a problem for us. I would never encourage, especially in middle and high school, to adopt a consumable book, but that is what we did maybe 2 or 3 years ago when science was up for adoption. And so that's what we're dealing with. But I did meet with Christy Hatch just as recently, again as today, to talk about what we might be able to do in order to get our science books where we need to be. Because right now it's a consumable issue, and it's an every year $400,000, $500,000 to replace just that science book. And you can see from our allocation that that's a big chunk of money to have to use every year for one subject.
Will there be any relief this year, perhaps?
We might, I'm working with her on changing to maybe our second choice, which is not consumable. It is just a regular book, and there are some things that go with it online that you can use as a teacher and use it as a resource and print off some additional things. So I'm kind of in the middle of hoping to work that out so that we don't constantly have to use $400,000 every year for science, and then next year when we adopt something else, there's that chunk of money, because the money is just not there to do it that way.
If I may, just remind me. To add to what Larry said, not just the science book, but textbooks overall, I think I've told you a lot of times how parents are wanting books to come home. And I know, sometimes I don't think the public understands, we're doing the best we can with what we have, and there's a shortage for whatever reasons. What are we going to do to address that? I say that because when we had a different person, I recommended or asked or suggested that we use just the technology, have it downloaded, put it on USB drives, just so the kids can have something, and that kind of went nowhere. So if you would just take that in consideration so that the parents can have something, and I'll leave it there.
Okay.
And Dr. Moore, we're on the same line, Ms. Smith. I know like Macon County a few years ago partnered, maybe Verizon, I can't remember, but they did the tablets so that they had the online books. And I know there are pros and cons to all of that, but I know like Baldwin County has that, and I know that there are a lot of programs where you can get deals for the tablets and the textbooks. So did Talladega have something like that, or are you familiar with some systems that maybe that we could look into that?
Talladega, that was something they were thinking about going to. And as you just stated, there are several districts now that are using online textbooks.
Sure.
So that is something that we may want to look at.
And then they update,
Right.
especially like science and things like that, that you really need to stay on the cusp edge of, especially science, I think, would be your most important subject for changing. And I just, I know it would be expensive, but I also think maybe with the way our kids live, they're more inclined to have that iPad than they are the paper like we had when we were growing up.
It may be expensive at first, but it'll pay for
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
the initial cost.
Right.
Arthur,
Yes, sir.
who's eating those textbooks? You said they were consumable.
No,
Doc-
they're using them, you know, you have sheets and things, they use worksheets and things of that sort.
Mr. President.
One thing that I'm noticing too, not only with the science, but my understanding, our history books, we don't have, they're so outdated till, President Obama's been out now, you say 8 years, we don't have books with the president, latest president in it.
Maybe not even,
I told them, don't tell that.
My understanding, that's where we are. I mean, we need to update, and certainly, children need to have current, information, rather than just all the things, you know, something, American Revolution. We need to look at some things that's happening right now, you know. Yeah.
Mr. President, I know this is really probably a little bit out of line, but our wonderful gentleman from Office Depot that just gave money raised his hand like he might have some incredible idea
Okay.
about textbooks, so do you mind pitching it real quick?
Yeah, sure, so what's the protocol was, but, just in addressing some of the questions that you had, so, I've worked with districts across Georgia and Alabama, and just to, Mr. Watt's point about what some other districts are doing, we've partnered with a number of districts, across the southeast. Two primary things that we're seeing a large trend in. Number one is when it comes to technology and helping keep that cost down, a lot more districts are starting to lease that technology rather than buy it outright. You can get more per student capita, and then also, since technology changes so quickly, you're able to refresh that out in a positive way. The other thing to keep in mind is, I know there are pros and cons about consumable curriculum. However, what we're also seeing is a continued trend and push towards more open source curriculum, where the advantages of being able to print a consumable unit but only print what you need. Our team is working with districts to essentially literally create custom district books, you know, at the school level that can then be printed to just have what they need. Those books then are a lot thinner, only contain the content that are needed, and are a little bit easier to go home and stuff, and are a lot less expensive than the traditional textbooks. So those are two of the trends that we're seeing that may help alleviate some costs over the course of time.
We'll ensure that, pass this message on to our textbook coordinators and most superintendents.
I've got a question. I think it's just my perfectionist in it. If I took, because my math is just not coming out the same as yours. On, if you look down at the textbooks where it's $70, you have 206.3387, okay? And what I did is I took the number of students, 29, how did you come up with that? I mean, I'm like, I'm not that much off.
Right.
But I took the 29,476.85 and multiplied that by 70. Shouldn't that be my 206.3387?
That should be very close to it, yes.
Okay, well, it's not, so these aren't exact.
What's the difference?
I think it's like $10, but still.
$10.
I mean, but then then I go over and do the next one. I did the 54,518, and I see you off there. You know, I was just kind of looking.
The reason for that is the state looks at the entire pot, and so that would probably, $10 or $15 probably gonna be rounding from the states out from the entire. They look at, the whole 200 and whatever number was 730,000 students, and they multiply it by that number, so it's probably rounding, for.
So these numbers,
Only $3 off.
and these numbers are sent to us by the state as what our actual allocation is gonna be
Actual allocation
when
by
the state sends it to us,
Right.
as opposed to our
So they're not
math.
exact.
The state sends us an allocation, that's what you have on there.
Thank you.
Just 3 instead. It's all over the
Yeah,
place.
the state sends us, here's what you're gonna get.
That's it. You want me on?
Received the total amount for the state's foundation program of $174,156,000 compared to $172,763,150 last year. That's about a $1.3 million difference or increase, but I'll talk about that a little bit later too. Now, I talked earlier about the state requires us to what is called fund match. When we look at this total, we see $174,156,972. That is not the amount the state is going to provide us. The state is going to give us. The amount that the state is actually going to send to us is going to be $149,993. The rest of it we have to make up in that match. Therefore, what we should be able to add the amount of that state foundation program amount there, 149,993, and add that to that $24 million. And that should give us that 170, what was it?
169, yeah.
174, 156
For 2019,
for
169.
2019.
169, 169 million, 145,000.
So actually, the actual amount that the state will provide us is almost $150 million compared to $148 million last year. Well, one may look at that and say, well, you got an increase this year. You got a $1.6 million increase that the state is going to provide you for fiscal year 2019. I'm gonna do a little test here to the public or to anyone. Why would that amount be more this year? Salary increase, that's right. There's a state mandated raise of 2.5% for all public education employees. Because we know truly that because we lost ADM, that we losing money. But that increase is based on the state also funding that 2.5% increase. We also see school nurses, the state also provides money, that's another state funding source. School nurses, in which we propose to receive about $974,000 compared to $975,000 the prior year. The state legislature is funding a little bit more for technology coordinators, about $55,940 to go towards the salary of our technology coordinator. And transportation, let's look at transportation. We're being funded $8.1 million for transportation for 2019 compared to last year, about $8.8 million. That's about a $765,000 decrease in funding for transportation operations. That hurts a lot. That hurts an awful lot. So we're having to make up that impact somewhere. And so in this particular budget, what we did was monies that we used to sell school buses, money that was derived from selling school buses, we used some of that to make up that shortfall, along with some monies that the district received from field trips. Because those monies have to also be set aside just for transportation needs. So we made up that shortfall with those particular funds.
Was that a cutback from the state?
It's a cutback from the state. It's a cutback from the state. And of course, this is something I'll have to, dig into even more as to why. The state funds transportation based on the bus drivers and the number of routes that you have. I'm hearing that we misreported our routes. So that's something we need to look into.
Well, when that's done and made right, then that should increase, shouldn't it?
It really depends on the number of routes that's needed. So from what I'm hearing is, now it's based on the number of routes that we really was supposed to have up at the beginning. So now I'm thinking that it's gonna be around this $8.1 million thereon. Now, they're not going back and finding us for the prior years, but this $8.8 million was the amount we was funded last year, and what I'm hearing is that there was some situation, because I asked that same question. And so this is something I'm gonna dig in a little bit more. I'll be talking with the transportation director, and we'll kind of see what's going on there.
And Mr. Chairman, let me remind you that the transportation and the way that the routing works is only loaded student miles that you're reimbursed for the transportation. So any other shipping around or moving buses around without loaded student miles, you're not reimbursed for. But what we can do, Mr. Watson, Mr. Anderson, we can look at transportation, and we can do a more in-depth breakdown for you on that and explain to you what some of those gaps were, Mr. Chairman.
And let's also keep in mind that transportation allocation is just based on transporting students to and from school. That's it, just to and from school. Any type of extracurricular, whether it's athletics, student activities, or whatever, the state does not fund us for that. So that's where field trip monies and those kind of things come in to support those particular areas. We see fleet renewal, an increase of about $154,000. And that's another area that the state is trying to catch up in. Really, what the intent was to 100% fully fund transportation. That was the proposal back in 2008. And so I'm hoping that that's still a proposal and that they'll eventually continue to put monies into transportation and fleet renewal. But fleet renewal dollars are basically used to purchase school buses. It's to purchase school buses or pay bus debt. And of course, I think we purchased, how many buses did we purchase last year? Was it this year or last year?
Last year, it was like,
114,
Okay.
something like 114.
I know we purchased several buses, this year or last year.
This past year.
And so the majority of these dollars now is allocated to paying that bus debt, down. Now, I think the bus debt is about $1.3 million a year.
Mr. Watts, what was, percentage-wise, what percentage does the state pay and what's the percentage we cover
In transportation?
in transportation, yes?
Let me find that for you.
Okay.
I'll get it for you.
It's in the
Yeah, well,
section.
it was 78%, I think, one year.
It was-
Was it last year or this year? I'll find out though. We see capital purchase of about $7.4 million, the increase of about $71,000. The at-risk funds, of course, currently, we had the, what's the name of the program? And
Attorneys?
yes, PACE, yes. The PACE program, and we were at Fuse, I think, was with the alternative programs, which is at McIntyre now. But these funds will help support funding for both of those programs, these at-risk funds. And again, Ms. Brown, these funds, now they expect to use, for high hopes and everything else now, so.
Right.
Career Tech O&M, we see about $131,000. This is strictly for our Career Tech students. But we see a total state funds of about $169,000 for fiscal year 2019 compared to 2018, $168 million. Again, for fiscal year 2019, those total funds also consist of that 2.5% raise in those various areas. I think this is the time to say something else. Mr. President, we just been informed that as it relates to the state foundation program, that we may get about $460,000 less than the amount that's allocated on that FY 2019 sheet right there. So instead of 149.9, it may be about 149.5 or 149.4 is what we've been told. I think it's based on the way that they allocate the match based on our local taxes. So I've just been informed of that. I'll get more information and I'll provide that to you.
What was your reasoning for that?
It was based on the way that the state calculates the local match. And it was something about the FY, because what they do, they take the amount of our local revenues, and based on our local revenues, they determine that 10 mil match. And they sort of usually require that the financial statement is approved by November 1st, or by November 1st, so they can go ahead and get those numbers to the legislature to determine those numbers. So I guess that was the problem with having that financial statement in at the time, and so they had to go with what they had. Then when the financial statement was approved, they had to go back and use the figure the true figure, or the real figure. And then based on that, that's what caused that decrease. That's what I'm here. A breakdown of our other proposed revenues and other fund sources. In our general fund, we see ROTC makes up the majority of those federal dollars. And then we see our local revenues, our district property and other property taxes, or the various property taxes. Again, that's $54 million out of the $200-some million, which is about 24-25% of our total revenue. Again, at some point, I'd like to see that go up to about 35 to 40% local revenues. But I still will get that comparative data. Other revenues and other fund sources, indirect costs, is that small administrative fee that the general fund access to federal programs in order to run those particular programs. So we're projected to receive about $2.1 million in that area. Transfers in about $640,000. These are dollars that we are proposing to receive from local schools. Local schools will transfer monies into the district to help pay for field trips. Because they have field trips, they have athletic events, they have all of these events. And so they have to pay for both the drivers and the mileage on those buses. And so these are dollars they'll transfer into the district to help us pay for the drivers and pay for the mileage on those buses.
Mr. Watson, I have a question real quick. I know, like, I've been a public shopper for years, and you know how you do your little thing, and when you check out, you tell them what school, and they give that money. Could we get an idea of how much money our schools are making? I know Publix is one, and I know there are other stores that, you know, they're trying to support.
Right.
But we never hear about, like, what those totals are.
Okay, yes.
And like the license tag,
Yeah, they have these school tags.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, we can. We
I
can.
just, that would be interesting to know.
Yes, yes. In fact, I have that,
What
I have
that-
the school tag and number. I don't have it with me, but I have that. I'll give it to you.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
Now, we just talked about the various revenues. Let's talk about expenditures for a second. And that's, of course, as you know, that's the spending of the funds. There are basically 8 expenditure areas that local schools, every local school have. First, there's the instructional services, which is basically expenditures related to the interaction between the teacher and the student. Therefore, all of the teachers' salaries and benefits would be deemed instructional services expenditures. Any teacher materials and supplies would be deemed instructional services expenditures. So anything that deals with that teacher providing instruction to that student, that would be deemed instructional services expenditures. Then we have instructional support services. Instructional support services are those individuals or those activities that help support and supervise our teachers and others. For example, the principals would be deemed instructional support services expenditures. Counselors, librarians, all of those would be deemed instructional support services expenditures. Even some of the instructional support folk that we have here or have in our other buildings that go out, that are dispersed out to the schools to help support our teachers and help support our principals, those will be deemed instructional support services expenditures. So that those activities provide supervision and support to facilitate instructions, because we all know that principals, assistant principals also, we know all of these folks, they help support the principal, help support the teachers, and help support the student. They're not the teachers, but they're helping support instruction to the student. So that's what that is. Operation and maintenance, as we all know, activities concerned with keeping all of our buildings open, comfortable, and clean. So all of the expenditures related to maintenance would be considered operation and maintenance expenditures. Custodians, all of our custodians throughout the district would be considered operation and maintenance expenditures. All of our utilities, power bill, light bill, gas bill, all of those items are operational and maintenance expenditures. Oh, it says safe also. Security department and security items would be deemed operational and maintenance expenditures. So that would consist of most of the salaries and benefits of all of those areas that I just named. Auxiliary services, activities of subsidiary capacity and lending assistance to the educational process. Auxiliary services would be transportation, all transportation expenditures, and that's in our general fund. But in our special revenue fund, where we have federal dollars, that would be child nutrition. So auxiliary is made up of 2 areas. It's made up of transportation in our general fund, and it's made up of child nutrition in our special revenue fund, where our federal dollars are derived. General Administrative Services, we all know what that is. Superintendent's office, board, the finance office, all of those activities concerned with establishing and managing policy for the school district. And all of the support that goes along with that. Capital outlay, activities of acquiring land and building, basically the renovation and the building of schools for the most part. Debt service, again, paying a long-term debt, principal and interest. Other expenditures, activities or programs other than normally considered day schools. Other expenditures, and this is kind of ironic to some degree, pre-K would be considered other expenditures. And when we read this again, activities or programs other than those normally considered day school. And so when I thought about that earlier, I said, well, pre-K is, the program is happening during the daytime. Well, from the state's level, it's considered an other program. It's not considered a regular day program. Now, you'll find in some other states where pre-K is part of the regular day program and it is funded as such. So that may be part of the reason that it's stated that other than normally normal considered day schools, because those normal considered day schools is K-12 education. That's what the state does. And now let's look at our level of expenditures. One thing that we do see of about $185, $186 million towards instructional services and instructional support services. So $186 million of those dollars are going to the classroom or going to support the classroom. That's pretty good. In most districts, you see about 70%, 69, 70%. That's probably closer to 80%.
Arthur, let me ask a question, please, sir. Going back to the pre-K, Dr. Moore, how many pre-K classes do we have?
It's a loaded question. I'm not sure right now. I think we have 45 or 50, and we're supposed to be getting more over time. And of course, there's a little caveat to that. In many places in this state, it's beginning to cost the system to have pre-K. You know, it's funded some right now, but now it's beginning to cost. The more you get, the more it's beginning to cost the system.
Yeah, that was really my point, because we go in the hole every time we start one of them.
Right. Well, what they do, they usually provide you around $150,000 the first year. The first year of origination is about $150,000, then that money dwindles to about $90-some to $100,000. But at that time, now you got your teacher, you gotta have a teacher, you gotta have that paraprofessional, and then all the supplies, and you gotta have a playground and all those other things that go along with it. So you're absolutely right, it does. So we're having to basically supplement some of our federal dollars, Title I dollars, to help support pre-K, along with our general fund.
We need to lobby our legislators, the importance of pre-K.
Right.
I think they understand it.
Yeah,
They're
but
good.
need to give us some money.
Don't understand, let put some money on it.
You can't get blood out of a turnip.
They keep
Well,
calling
'cause
about all
we
the
can
money
try.
we've got.
Remember, they had pledged a few years ago that they were gonna get up to a certain amount, and then we lost that.
Yeah, John said it's not.
Yeah, he was, because he understood the need. Coach.
And then lastly, we have other fund uses of about $1.1 million. And of course, we're required to transfer monies to our child nutrition program to help pay their benefits, the benefits on their salaries. Of course, we withheld that pass-through this prior year. We won't be able to hold all of it this year. So we will have to support the child nutrition program. We're looking at about $1.1 million of that this year. So we look at our total expenses of about $231 million. And there we have a breakdown of our pie chart of our total expenditures. We see about 80.7 towards instruction, which includes both instruction and instructional support.
Is that about right?
Well, instruction is usually around, in a lot of school districts, usually around about between maybe 68 to 71% usually. Instructional support together.
Okay.
So we're giving more and getting less?
We're spending more in that particular, in a particular area of instruction than what most school districts spend in that particular area.
I'd rather see it spend in instruction than salary.
We're getting less from it.
But we need to be getting more bang for our buck.
That's what I'm
Right,
saying.
That's true, that's true. Yeah, if we're spending the amount of money spent, we certainly want to make sure that we're getting, you know, the results that everybody's seeking, so.
Mr. President, and Madam Superintendent, will there be and I know there will, because I know you, Dr. Moore, but there will be a plan put in place to kind of look at maybe adjusting this a little bit, making sure we're getting that bang
That
for the
category,
buck.
of
Yes, for
getting
that
what we're paying
category
for,
funding,
yes.
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 Mr. Chairman, may I please add, Mr. Watts, would you please clarify, instructional, the 80% on instructional is comprised of what?
It's comprised of instruction and instructional support, which includes the salaries and benefits of all of our teachers, all of our principals, all of our assistant principals, all of our counselors, all of our librarians, all instructional materials and supplies that the teachers use, all of the supplies and so forth that principals use, counselors use, librarians use, other support, people that go to the classroom to help support the teachers and support the principals. So it'll be the salary, benefits, materials, and everything related to, that teacher or supporting that teacher to provide instruction to the students.
So
Thank
does that
So it includes
include
the salaries
central
and benefits,
office?
or it is in that, yes, ma'am.
So that, a little bit broken down on page 17, I think, was the one that you went through earlier. To break that down and explain it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you, sir.
And you all, this is the most depressing slide that I have in this particular PowerPoint.
Depressing.
Yes.
I know.
Very depressing.
Yeah, because next year, around this time, we're gonna have to find about $10 million.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Look forward for you, want to do the slide?
Go ahead, go ahead, because I know how you feel on that one. And that's gonna be a mountain to climb.
Good luck.
That's gonna be a mountain right there for you.
Robert,
Hey,
Robert, we're gonna be.
I ain't in that week.
oh, okay, well, I'm just saying, that's a mountain.
As we stated earlier, that we're looking at in our general fund, and let's say this, that the general fund is the fund that the state view to determine what our 1 month fund balance is. General fund is the only fund that the state is really looking at to determine that 1 month fund balance. So we see total revenues and other fund sources of about $221 million. Total expenditures about $231 million. That's about a $9.2 million deficit.
Yes, sir.
But Mr. Watt, shouldn't the fund balance that we're supposed to have, well, you know, our reserve, that's going to have to change if everything else is decreasing.
That's right, that's right.
Then we can't, I mean.
So we'll have to divide whatever those expenditures are by 12 to determine what that 1 month fund balance is. Yes, ma'am. In the general fund though, only in the general fund.
It won't be 18.
Okay, you know what, thank you, nobody's ever explained it that way.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, it's the total expenditures in the general fund divided by 12.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So, we
That's how you
see,
get 1 month back.
Right.
yes, ma'am.
But I mean, it's nice to know that's where
Yeah.
you divide it from.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
You learn
that's where it
something new
comes
every day.
So we see our excessive revenues over expenditures of about $9.2 million. And that's a very, very hard deficit. Again, and maybe I need to clarify something else, because I want full disclosure. I didn't have an opportunity to dive down into some of these numbers the way I would have liked to. You know, as I stated, my budget process usually starts in January or February. So we pretty much started the budget process around August. So I kind of had to go with what we go with a lot that we had, and we did look at a lot of things. We did talk with all of the various department heads and so forth. So this number here is subject to change when I get ready to do the amendment, when I have an opportunity to really study and dive down into some of these numbers. But what I'm afraid of, that even, let's just say I'm $2 million off here. Let's say it's $7 million. That's still something to be concerned about. Because this deficit it's recurring. Meaning that if we don't do anything about it, we're gonna see $7 million decline the following next year, $7 million decline the following year, $7 million decline thereon. So we have to do something about this deficit. Therefore, Mr. President, we really, really have some hard decisions that we have to make.
If this district is gonna continue to, let's say, function and continue to move forward, there is critical need, and I have said this over and over, for an increase in ad valorem taxes for Montgomery County Public Schools. If it does not happen, then certainly we're going to be in a, well, you're in a heck of a fix here, because I don't see it happening any other way.
Yes, sir.
Any other way, that means that you're gonna start taking away from the children.
Right.
In order to.
We are gonna have to cut expenditures.
Absolutely. Otherwise, then, you'll see things start to deteriorate.
Yes, sir. We're projected to end the year, we'll have our fund balance by the end of 2018. We're projected to end the year with about a $19 million fund balance at the end of this fiscal year.
So, Mr. Weiss, I'm gonna go back to something I remember you saying when you first came on board.
Yes, ma'am.
We sold the school, and I'm not bringing that up for controversy, but it didn't fix the problem. So
Right.
now we're having to put something in place that's going to sustain us where we, at the level we need to be at.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Been
Exactly.
saying it all the time.
And
bad name.
that's one of the things about, not relying on just one-time revenue.
Right.
Because it's one time. But those expenditures are recurring. So unless you do something with the expenditures, or we find a revenue source that's going to be continuing also, such as an increase in ad valorem taxes, or a combination of both, reducing the expenditures and some additional revenues, then it's going to pretty much be on us to really reduce expenditures to this amount. That's a lot of pain, Mr. President.
I understand. I really understand. I promise you, I understand. But I continue to say, with the amount of support that we get, local funding, with the minimum amount of local funding that we get, and I continue to say that, well, someone said, well, since 2008, we're working on the same funding from 1970, because that's when the 10 mil came in, 1970. So we're working on 1970 funds in 2019.
Right.
So you can't buy a loaf of bread for what you could buy in 1970.
Right.
So we got to understand the cost of education has increased.
Right, and I'd be interested to know, and one of you all may know, when was the last time we had an increase for education property taxes? Has it been
1970,
1970?
And that was a mandate.
it was a mandate.
That was a federal mandate.
Okay, wow. Okay. So we're projecting to end fiscal year 2019 with about a $9.7 million fund balance.
What's the truth?
Again, we are way below, almost double below the 1 month fund balance at the end of 2019. And we know that if we don't do something, because that $9.2 million is recurring, that 2020, then we see the results of that.
Mr. Watts, Mr. President, if I may, because I really want people to really understand this. This is, when you say looking at expenditures, possibility of cutting teachers, which goes against our mission statement to keep our classrooms smaller, selling schools. Those are the two biggest that I can think of off the top of my head that will directly impact our students. Because if you have to close school, I mean, at this point, I don't know if we're gonna find anybody with $9 million. I don't know if we have a school worth another $9 million.
I know you can't sell a school each year.
And you can't
because
sell one
each time
each
you sell a
Right,
school,
because
you
that's one-time
grab children.
revenue, so, it may be good to be able to sell a school to have that cash right then to be able to meet some certain demands to make payroll or whatever, but it's not something that we can depend on, so.
It's not
we're gonna have to
reoccurring, not
address-
recurring.
Recurring, that's right, so we're gonna have to address this situation from a recurring standpoint.
That's correct.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, please, what I want to offer to you at this time is that is exactly what this is for, as Mr. Watts takes a break, is to inform you of where we are and what's going on. You got another meeting on Thursday of this week. That gives you time to talk about this and think about this and come up with ideas and things that you would like to see, reports that you would like to have generated. But what happens is, what Mr. Watts' typical plan is, By January, we start looking at a myriad of options. It's all kinds of things. Mr. Chairman, it's the staffing piece, it's the capital assets piece, it's the innovation and programming piece, it's recruitment and retention of, the students to our programs. There are lots of things that we look at. In some districts, pre-K is an asset to increasing revenue because it generates student population, therefore ADM, therefore revenue the next year funding. So there are lots of best practices and innovation out there that we will use January to start putting into the plan. Dr. Moore leads that work, Mr. Watts has a role, all of the executive staff folks have a role, and you guys as board members, you bring to the table the things that you would like to see and the additional reports that you would like to have generated as we put this strategy and this strategic plan together on how we're going to handle these funds. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just have to, I said when I got here, I prayed to God I would just shut up, and I wouldn't say anything at this one, but I swear he's just not looking at me, on this. I had heard, and I know I'm right, it's not just I heard, I believe it. When you have a certain number of students, and then you're based, you're getting your money from arrears, and you are still keeping that same amount of personnel, that's how, and I heard it from an excellent source, that's how we got into this. So we sell a school to get us out of it. And we can say, well, we put a Band-Aid on it. Yeah, we did put a Band-Aid on it. But I can pull up, and I save every email. I tape almost every little thing I can, whatever conversation. And no matter how many times I say, hey, when are we going to reduce the personnel at central office? We were told that by the state. And no matter how many times we've changed hands, we went from Centans, then we moved from Centans to Richardson to now, okay? And every new regime that comes in hires their people right under them, and then they hire their people. And I asked the question, how are we hiring more people, okay? And I still have that same question. So if we've got to make the hard decisions, when the tarnation, that'll be a good word, are we going to do it? Because we hadn't. And I don't see us doing that. So we can sit here all day ago and go, well, we got some hard decisions. Well, by darn, it doesn't matter how many emails I've sent, right, left, state, they look at me like I'm a pain in the rear. And I've said the same thing every time. How do you put on more people and more people? And then when you put on more people, you put on more people that could be your secretary. You're not looking at people that are really qualified for that job. We keep non-tenured people at central office, that really don't need to be here. And then we've got non-tenured people that I could pull up an email today. They can send their letters to human resources and say, hey, will you look at me? Nobody will even answer these people. So y'all want to talk about 10 mil? I've said it, and I'm going to end here. You are not going to get the city of Montgomery to buy into any taxes until you change the leadership of right here. And it's not been done since I've been on the board. End of story.
I would just like to address one thing, Dr. Keith. And this is something that I've said both to boards and superintendents in previous positions. That it is important, unless you're going to get an incurring revenues, that when you have the drop in students, you must make adjustments every single year. You have to. Not just every other year. You have to make adjustments every single year. Even if we were to get whatever a number of meals, based on our student situation the following year, we still would need to make adjustments, and that's something we want to get in the habit of, making those adjustments every single year. Because then you're making those adjustments based on your funding sources and based on your priority needs. And that's what those decisions need to be based on.
Okay, so right now you're talking the talk. Who can we expect to walk that walk? Because I hadn't seen it.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, what I want to close this point on is, this is the presentation in budget meeting 1, there's budget meeting 2, and then the vote on Thursday, and all of the conversation, the investigation, the fact-finding, the information, the executive cabinet members, and then your concerns becomes part of the plan, and Dr. Moore leads that work. That comes after we get this budget piece done. Obviously, you're supposed to give comments during this budget process now, but the work that you're asking for now, this is not the time for that work. That comes after we're done with this, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Rowland.
I don't agree.
May
I've
con-
been
continue,
saying this.
Let's continue,
That makes sense.
Mr.
It
Watts,
does, I agree.
let's try to finish it.
So now, we'll talk about, just talk about the general fund, which is our largest fund. So these funds, so I know we have bored you all to death, by now. So just be sure to go a little quicker. The special revenue fund is our next, funding source. And as we stated earlier, the special revenue fund is mainly our federal dollars. Most of our federal dollars are in the special revenue fund. The Title I, about $15 million. You got Title II, 1 point something million. You got child nutrition. All of those are federal dollars. So we see a breakdown of our total special revenue. We see about $5.4 million of local funds in our special revenue fund. Most of those dollars are local school public funds and money that child nutrition bring in from the sale of, I think it's called a la carte, if I'm not mistaken. The a la carte and the money that it gets in from the sale of breakfast, lunch, and so forth. Most of those funds are reimbursed from the federal government, but there are some students that pay a reduced amount, and some students pay for the full meal. So that's what that local is. Local school public funds, like admissions to games and so forth, and concessions and so forth from local schools, and money that child nutrition bring in. And then we see just a quick pie chart of our special revenue fund, and we see the larger amount are our federal dollars. This chart just shows a comparison of the dollars that we receive from those federal sources and kind of compare it to the prior year.
Mr. White,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't really agree too much with what Mr. Rowland just said. And the fact that we're here today to hear what you have to say. I mean, you don't adopt a budget and make the budget fit what you have in the bank. That's not how it's done. That's not how I do my budget at home. And so what I think we need to do today is ask the question that Lisa's asking and the rest of us are asking. And then when we come back Thursday and we have time to talk about this among ourselves and with other people that know a little bit more about this than we perhaps know, but to talk about shutting us down, see, then we get accused of approving a budget that we really didn't approve of. You know what I'm saying? So I think the purpose of having a hearing and discussing it is doing just what we're doing here today. Because I have warned here about school improvement grants, and I know we have grant writers, and I know we've had people that we have hired that brought grants in and doing whatever. And then when those grants are no longer funded, then we take it and put it in our general budget.
Great
And we-
point. Go on.
And we got to stop doing that kind of thing.
Yes. And I want to reiterate what Ms. Brown just said. We have to be very, very careful in a lot of these grant funding, because a lot of these grants may be 2 years or 3 years, 3-year grants. Well, let's say that you got a $3 or $4 million grant. You had a lot of people in that $3 or $4 million grant. Federal government doesn't fund that grant the next year, but you still got the people.
Right.
Yeah.
You still got the people.
Right.
So what do you do with the people? Do you shift them to general fund? Well, that could be part of the problem that we have.
That's what's in
Well, so
there.
these are the kind of things that we need to think about and to make sure that we plan for, in the future.
And I just wanted to, Ms. Pitts, because she
Oh,
really
yeah, you did.
changed that with Title I, because that was a major problem. And now, when they hire them, they say, this is 1 year, and I say, thank you, because that was something that
And
we.
that has helped a great deal. It has helped tremendously. She does a good job with that.
But we do need
Well, I
to
think
do
they
more.
look at it more carefully. Let's see if we can continue to move through.
And there we see the breakdown of the other funds that are part of our special revenue fund, part of the $53 million, as we said. $47 million, the grand majority of that is federal dollars, and they're those federal dollars, and then we see those other funds. As I stated, the local amount was mainly CMP, and local school funds. And there we see our expenditures related to instructional, related to special revenue, which is mainly our federal dollars. You see instructional support being about 18 million, instructional support services about 10 million, auxiliary services about 19.8 million. We'll see if the auditors were listening. In the special revenue fund, what is auxiliary services?
Transportation.
Transportation is in general fund, but in the special revenue. Transportation, CMP. So CMP is the amount of auxiliary and special revenue. Transportation is in the general fund.
So, Mr. Watts, do you know if we are using the meals per labor hour formula for CNP?
Yes. We do look at that meals per labor hour formula to see whether we're overstaffed. And CNP has done pretty good over the years. In fact, if CNP hadn't done so well, we would not have been able to withhold that pass-through the past year.
That's
So,
how Jason found $5 million.
right, that's right.
I know, he moved it. He just moved it from one source to another.
Earlier than we would usually.
If we could fry chicken, we could probably make it.
Let's move on.
We could fry chicken.
There we have a pie chart of our total expenditures. We see instruction again being 54%, auxiliary, which is CNP, being 37%. And there we have our special revenue total fund equity. You see we're projecting total revenues of about $54 million, total expenses of about $53.1 million, with an excess of revenue over expenditures of $853,000. Of course, that's what we want to see. We want to see an increase in the fund balance. So we're projecting to begin the year with about $4.4 million and end the year 2019 at about $5.3 million. Again, most of this will be child nutrition and local schools.
We have a question out there from the audience, Mr. Wise.
Yes, I have a few things. The first thing we kept talking about is deficit of the general fund and the 10 mil. We know that's probably not happening, so I'm hoping the board would come up with some other options, because I heard that a lot over the years about that. We might want to solicit some donors, do a fundraiser, community project or something, or even some more grant writing that can bring in some funds. The other concern I have at the risk, I heard you all say you want to give some money to McIntyre for that situation. We already spent $900,000 supporting McIntyre in their new program. So I'm hoping with this at-risk fund, the $911 million that you're spending, $1,000 that you're spending towards the traditional schools, bringing back after-school program, tutoring, and so forth to help those students. Because we already committed $900,000 for the overage school at McIntyre. So I wish you all would look at spending that money towards additional schools at-risk programs. My last thing is professional development. I know when Dr. Eggleston was here, he restricted the travel of out of county and out of state for professional development. So I'm hoping that the new superintendent and Dr. Roller will look into resending that email that was sent out to members for this fiscal year, that we can travel for professional development and get our certificate renewed and CEUs and all of that. So I want you all to consider that when you're doing this budget and so forth.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
And I would like to say something. Some of us were, nothing against that, but some of the things we heard and saw is some of the PD money was spent on things like upgrades and rooms and stuff like that.
What money are you speaking to?
The professional development money. And the problem is with some of us that have talked about this is we never get to hear what y'all did. Nobody comes back and says, hey, this is what we found or this is what we did. And it's hard to back something that we don't know really what came from that.
Well, the professional development, the changes were made as I stated by Dr. Eckerson, that professional development funds had to go to the students. I'm asking you all as the board to resend that email so that we can get professional development and training. You all went on a retreat or something last meeting y'all supposed to. Anyway,
We went to training at the.
yes,
AASD.
ma'am, training, retreat.
Not a retreat, may I
Okay.
add something on the professional
But I
development
would,
piece that
professional
was-
development piece,
That was
we
with-
do bring it back to our school, and you all are welcome to visit the schools at any time to see exactly what we do.
I will tell you, probably 3 or 4 of us up here are teachers and have been in professional development. And know what you do, and that's I mean, some of the things you do, but the big thing is we don't get what you really do when you fly off to these big places, change
Well, I never
rooms,
flown off to a big place
upgrades,
on
take your family, it's, you know.
Okay, so let me
add.
add this to kind of help with this
Okay.
little debate, so we can get back to the budget piece, because we're having a hearing, and we need to concentrate on that.
Right.
But a lot of professional development is paid for out of Title II, which is designated just for that. It's not, it can't be used.
To do other things. And so that was frozen, but it did create a little ripple because we had to go back and redo that piece. So under Title II, we can do professional development. And we're trying to make sure that Dr. Cook is in the loop and it's not just haphazardly done. So we're gonna work on making sure that it's focused and strategically done towards some issue that we need to address as a school district.
And the superintendent, she'll be sitting down with her administrative team, and we'll be putting a plan together, you know, to address several of these needs. I do know that in one area, this is just my little take on professional development, that we kind of had to reshape in another district. When I see 50 or 60 people, and I'm saying flying, I know you said you never flew, flying to different places. But sometimes it's a lot cheaper to have a consultant that comes here and have the consultant to do it here. And I've seen before about our doing that, then you don't have nearly the amount of participation that you had with the number of people that were flying out. So
Amen.
I've seen that before too, not saying that you would have done anything like that. But so we just need to come up with a plan and address all of these situations, so. Next, we have the debt service fund. Of course, this is to pay long-term debt. Now, the state does not basically give us any money for debt service. I see that amount is understated. This is part of the state capital purchase money. They do give us money to build and renovate schools. So this money is under state because it's part of our state capital purchase monies that we're using to pay down debt for our building and renovating some of our schools. I think we leveraged some funds years ago. And also we invested in a couple of, I think it's called QZAB bonds.
There was a QSCAB, but that comes off in 2020.
Right,
The
that's
last
right.
payment is 2020.
Yes, and I'm be looking for that date.
I know that's right.
We all are.
Right, so,
Q scale.
That QSCAB from Birmingham.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, we took Birmingham.
right.
Money.
But
Because they didn't
I
want it.
remember telling you all you could have it.
Now we have trouble paying it back.
Well, I'm just gonna say this. We had some local other elected officials that promised that they would help us pay that debt service. And they
Oh,
just
my,
pulled
my,
it
my.
back. So,
Well, Melissa, you know how those promises have.
yeah, I do. I got a song for it.
Go ahead, let's go on.
Did we get that in writing?
No, we didn't, that's the problem. Didn't get it in writing.
Gotta get it in
Oh, we
writing.
did.
We didn't get it in writing, Melissa. That's the problem.
The next fund is our capital purchase funds. Again, these are dollars that the state provided us to build, renovate schools. Most of those dollars, as I stated, is going to pay debt. So we see about $6.9 million of that at state, but we also saw $2 million of it in debt service. So if you add those two together, that's basically the amount that we're getting. Now, you see that local down there? That's that local match. I think you remember me stating that in order for us to receive that $8 or $9 million from the state, in state capital purchase funds, we're going to put up over $2 million to be able to receive those funds. So that's $2 million of our local taxes that's serving as part of the match for the capital projects fund. And then we see our expenditures for capital projects fund.
So, Mr. Wise, and Mr. President, if I may, in part, and I know we've heard how our schools look, we need to build them, tear them down, and as I look at this, I go, wow, I can't believe the low level of local support we get to do this, because when I always hear economic development, I was told by someone that they not only look at what's going on inside of the school, but they're looking at the outside of the schools, because that paints the picture of your city. If you look like you're neglecting your schools, you look like you don't care about education. So I'm a little surprised that we only get locally $2 million.
Right.
And that leaves, I mean, what can you do with that? Very little.
Maybe keep the grass cut, that's about it.
My pest control.
For the most part.
The last funding source is the expenditure trust fund, which is local school non-public funds, mainly our club funds. SGA club, the FFA club, what are some of the other clubs they have? The various clubs that the schools derive funding from. They may have a fundraiser, they may pay some school fees for these particular funds. And so they're projected to raise about $807,000 in non-public funds. The schools are. This is all schools. And they're basically projected to spend it all, about $806,000. So they're saying, okay, we'll have an excess of about $480 at the end of the year. We'll increase our funds out of it. But we see that they did have a fund balance of $453,000 at the beginning of the year. So they do have a fund balance at the local school level. This is all the schools. Okay. And this is the last chart that shows all of the funds put together. We see in the general fund, of course, we want to point out again that the excessive revenues over expenditures of about $9.2 million. This is the area that we're going to have to address. Fund balance at the beginning of the year, about $19 million. Ending fund balance of about $9 million in the general fund. Special revenue, which is mostly our federal dollars, projecting to receive about $54 million, to expend about $53 million. Beginning fund balance of about $447,000. We'll increase that by $853,000. That increase will be mainly local schools and child nutrition. So fund balance at the end of the year about $5.3 million in special revenue. We see debt service and we see capital purchase. We retained that $2,063,000 in capital purchase that we have to pay. That's Q-scale principal, Q-scale interest debt at the end of the year. So that's what those monies they are for. Chad, I know you were speaking about what you can do with those monies, so but that's towards the debt. So. Expendable trust fund again is local schools, non-public activities. And just in mind, viewing certain things, these are some of the budget challenges that I see, facing our school district. I'm sure the board may have others, but those are some of the ones that I see. Continued loss of student enrollment will continue to have an effect on us. Current funders, we got instructional programming that we need to continue. Building renovation, deferred maintenance is another huge area that we're not really addressing the concerns there. That costs millions upon millions of dollars.
And when you defer things that you know need to be done, it makes it worse when you actually do it. Absolutely. And they can't see that.
And do you know we have some buildings that are old that they don't have the infrastructure to even house Wi-Fi. So we've got a lot to be done with these buildings in this district.
I like the last one you had down.
Okay, the cost of goods and services are continuing to increase.
Our revenues are remaining stagnant and sometimes some areas decreasing. So, but you still have those expenditures.
Absolutely.
And many times those expenditures are increasing. So
absolutely,
we have our challenges before us. The Mr. President, we can entertain.
I think we're going to, I think everybody asked the question as we move along. So
think so.
everybody got anything at the end, I just can't believe
Well,
it.
we
Melissa,
appreciate you taking the
we're good with
time,
the questions?
and
Everybody's gone through the questions,
and
right?
explain and answer our questions when we ask, because that's what we need to do, and that's what we're supposed to be doing as board members.
And you were very thorough, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I learned something.
YP did a good job.
He did.
He did.
Well, we appreciate you, very thorough. You didn't miss a thing, you didn't miss a
May I
thing.
say
Yeah.
one thing to the board, and this will come up again, but once we finish with our budget hearings, of course, I'll remind the board, just because I need to, I think, that I've been here since June 1 officially. And so this year, as we work and using our budget figures, that we need to come up with a plan to address some of the things that Mr. Watts brought before us today. And it will be some things that probably, as a board, you're gonna get phone calls about, and you're gonna get emails about from different people. But we're gonna have to make the decisions about what it is that we need to do as a board based on the funding sources that we now know we have that we can count on. And then there are others that we know, we wish we had them, but right now we don't. And so we're gonna have to make some adjustments. And we will come up with a plan which says, okay, board, here's what I'm suggesting that we do. And then as we make recommendations in line with that plan, then the board has to be strong and amenable to those adjustments. And you'll get pressure from the outside about those things because they may not understand just what you have seen tonight and we'll see again Thursday night.
And even after all that, if we do amendments to our budget.
Right.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Arthur, question. In 25 words or less, where did all these numbers come from?
Well, we looked at, the total revenues, we looked at our, let's to local funds, we looked at our total tax dollars over the last several years. So we can get a proposal of what our proposed taxes would be for the current year. We looked at all of our expenditures over the last several years to determine what our projected expenditures are. Because our budget really is based on prior years expenditures or prior years revenue and current years projections and expectations, basically. And so what we did, I looked at 2 or 3 years back, the various funding sources, the various expenditures, and that's how the budget was obtained.
Okay. One last question over here.
I've got to ask this question. Where's Jason Taylor?
I'm not sure.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah. Yeah,
All
one
of
question.
this, all of the support that's coming from the State Department is being used in NPS, and other previous players have been reassigned and reallocated to other places.
Okay.
Outside of
We have one
MPS?
other question out there, Mr.
So
Watson. We
everything
can
you receive
join
is
the
what's
meeting
here.
here.
Everything else is gone.
Okay.
To a bi-monthly payroll would affect the budget.
It'll increase it.
It would.
Yeah.
Because to be able to meet those demands of payroll and that's why in the entire state, nobody in the entire state, or no one in the entire state do a bi-weekly payroll. Because now then you have to hire a bi-monthly payroll, because then you're gonna have to hire more payroll staff to even keep up with all of the information and get those checks out and so forth. Even the large district, even the districts that are well funded, the Vestavias and the Mountain Brooks, once a month, because they know that there's an increase in staffing. Oh, I'm sorry.
What was her question?
Our question was, have we looked at the possibility of how would it affect the budget if we were to go to a bi-monthly payroll? Bi-monthly payroll, I'm sorry. And I stated my response would be it would increase the expenditures of the budget and hire more salaries, and that's why many of the well-funded school districts, the Vestavias, the Mountain Brooks, and those school districts, that's why they still on a 1 month payroll cycle also.
We'll be outsourcing.
We certainly thank you, Mr. Washington, a very thorough job, and thank all those participants out there. This meeting now is adjourned.